Hello and welcome to the Hollywood Reporter Roundtable Directors. I'm Stephen Galloway, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, Matthew Bellamy, Denzel Washington.
Morning.
Mira Nair.
Morning.
Oliver Stone, Barry Jenkins, Damien Chazelle, and Mel Gibson.
Hi.
Let's start with the first question. I'd like to know, what was the very first moment when you remember falling in love with film?
The very first moment was actually under mosquito nets in Bhubaneswar in Orissa in East India, where I was grew up. And we had a foster grandfather type who used to shoot man-eating tigers. This is true. And he would come under the mosquito nets, an old friend of my family, and he would tell us these stories of the man-eating tiger that he shot when he was 25 years old in Orissa. And then he took us to the only cinema theater that existed in this little town, and they showed us only one film every Sunday morning, and that was Dr. Zhivago.
Wow. Wow.
So the contrast of being transported into a story by him and then being taken to Siberia in the heat of tropical India with Omar Sharif was something that was palpable and memorable and made me want to tell
So how many
stories.
times have you seen Dr. Zhivago?
Too often, really. Sometimes
Yes.
without sound,
Wow.
because sound would not exist and the picture would. But I've seen it too often. Yeah.
Denzel, how about you?
Same story, but it was Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh,
You know that one?
Really?
Oh, yeah. Because I grew up in a club, boys' club at the time, Boys and Girls Club. And for whatever reason, that was the only film they got. So we watched it over and over. The Creature from the Black Lagoon. He'd come out of the with bad makeup
Scared
and
the shit
stuff
out of me.
hanging. It scared you? Stuff hanging off. But I really wasn't a
William
film
Allen
person.
produced it.
Is that right?
Yeah, he's famous for It Came from Outer Space, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one, too.
That was in the nuclear age, when it started, and everybody was thinking about extraterrestrials coming to Earth in some form or other and blowing it up or killing us all.
So
When
I
did
didn't
you first
grow
think-
up a film. I mean, my
Yeah.
father was a minister. So 10 Commandments and King of Kings was it. That's all we saw. We went to church. I didn't go to movies. I never thought about movies. Wasn't interested in movies necessarily. I started acting in the theater in New York, in Fordham University. And we were snobs, and we thought we'd make $650 on Broadway one day. But at the same time, this was I started in 75. And I graduated in 77 with a theater degree. But it was Taxi Driver, Mean Streets, Straight Time, Marathon Man. So anybody with an O, Pacino, De Niro, Hoffman O. And it was movies
Yellow O.
it was movies like that. And I really didn't see anybody who looked like me. So I didn't aspire to act in movies because there was Richard Pryor and Sidney was on the end of his, and Richard was Billy D. Williams a little bit, but I liked those New York movies,
Did you think you might do something other than acting and directing in those
Never.
early days?
You mean other than acting and directing? Yeah, I tried everything. Yeah, I was
Another
pre-med.
profession, or?
Yeah, I was pre-med in college. Then I said I'd be a doctor. Then I was political science. I said I'd be a lawyer. Then I studied journalism. So I actually was working my way toward the arts without realizing. That's why I told my children, a liberal arts education is okay. You don't have to know at 7, I was 17 when I started college. You don't have to know at 17 what you're going to do the rest of your life. So I worked it out. I found my way to theater. I started with Eugene O'Neill's The Emperor Jones.
Wow.
First role. Second role was Othello. So I was...
Wow.
And now, August Wilson, to me, is one of the 5 or 6 greatest playwrights in American history. Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, Eugene O'Neill, Edward Albee, August Wilson. You can throw Neil Simon in there too, but...
Good list.
Yeah.
Oliver, what about you?
Oh, my mother used to take me out of school to play hooky and go with her to the movies. It was Wednesday, they used to open double features in New York. And she took me to one movie, it was black and white, and it was the first one I really remember. 2 lovers at the end of the movie were in love. They'd gotten away and they were in a car, headlights at night, and all of a sudden they do not cross this barrier sign shows up. They crash into it. End of movie. And it really, you see where my mentality is. Really.
You haven't changed in all those years.
But those were the B, they made B movies as the trailers sort of to the A movies. It was every Wednesday a double feature.
Which one most marked you Which film?
Well, I don't remember the name of it, you know.
You never
anything
found out.
with sex and danger.
Yeah.
Like the Hitchcock reactions to horror, you know.
You grew up in New York?
Yeah, yeah. You?
Yeah, yeah.
How come I didn't run into you?
I was uptown. I was in Mount Vernon, the Bronx.
But we used to go to 86th Street Theater.
Yeah,
That's as
yeah,
far
yeah,
uptown
yeah.
as we got.
Yeah.
Barry, what about you? And by the way, it's interesting because you and Damien, you grew up with television. So you maybe had a different experience of discovering film.
In a certain way, but no. I mean, similar to Denzel, I didn't really want to be a filmmaker growing up. It just seemed like it was beyond me. Never really thought, you know, I would see movies, but like I would, other than Spike's movies, you know, I would think, oh, you know, where's a place for me? But we were so damn poor that it just seemed like too far beyond. But I ended up at Florida State University, which is a big football school. And when they rebuilt the stadium, they had to put an arts program there. So the film school is in the stadium. So I'm walking to a football game and I see a sign that says film school. I go, oh, I like movies, let me try this out. First semester was terrible because I'm a little bit older than I look. We still shot everything on film. And I didn't know you needed light to expose film. So I was just like on the outs. And there's some really good filmmakers in the program at the time, like this guy Wes Ball, who does the Maze Runner movies. David Robert Mitchell was there. So I went to the dean. I was like, Dean, I kind of want to be here, but I need to figure this out. And so I took a year off, and I took a still photography class, started reading Sight and Sound, and I started watching, you know, everybody in film school, the films they made were like the filmmakers they were obsessed with. So it was a lot of Spielberg knockoffs, a lot of like Wes Anderson knockoffs. I was like, well, I want my voice to be different. So I started watching nothing but foreign films. I went to Blockbuster, and I chose the foreign film wall, and I just randomly started picking things off. I remember seeing Tarantino's face on the box for Chungking Express. And I was like, why is Tarantino on the box for Chungking Express? I think his company put that movie out in the States. And I just watched that film, and I was like, I've never been to Hong Kong. I have no idea what this is like. I don't really read subtitles, but this is amazing. And I was like, I want to do this. And I was just hooked, man.
Wow.
I was just hooked.
Damien.
How much has music been a through line in what you've wanted to make in films?
You know, movies, it came first, even though, I mean, there was no, my dad was a music, or still is, just obsessed with music, and so there was always a lot of jazz playing in the house, or blues, or, you know, just kind of, he's French, and I think a large reason why he moved to America was because he was so obsessed with 20th century American music, so those were the heroes in the house, but movies, he had no interest in movies, really, and movies were just something that, I don't know, yeah, I mean, it's probably what was playing on TV, and I think the first movie I saw was Cinderella, that happened to be on TV. That's what I'm told, at least, and I just sat and watched that over and over again, and I became, one of those kids that very early on was, like, glued to that experience of being just completely transported. So it started with, like, the Disney movies, you know, when I was at that age. I remember like one of the most formative movies that I ever saw for a very specific reason was Glory. Oh, yeah. And the reason it was so formative was I didn't know that characters could die at the end of a movie. Even though I knew some of the, you know, Shakespeare stories and things like that, I knew that it was allowed in theater and maybe old stuff from the past, but for whatever reason, it just never dawned on me that a character would die at the end of a movie, a main character. And, you know, now I guess I'm giving the movie away, but a lot of people die at the end of that movie, including everyone that you kind of love by that point. And I remember watching it, again, it was, you know, probably VHS tape on the TV, and as soon as you and Matthew Broderick went down, I was just like, wait, get back up. I don't, what the, and I got angry. I was like, get back up. And it just kind of, and then I went back and watched that movie like 100 more times. And so every movie at that age just kind of affected me on this gut level. And I think there was just some emotional connection that I found I didn't have with anything else, any other art form.
What about you, Mel?
Man, I didn't go to the big screen. I didn't go to a big dark room with public dreaming. I had a lot of brothers and sisters, and no one took us to the cinema. So my cinema experience was at home on a little black and white, one channel. And you just digested whatever came along. I was like a hydra, you know, something would float by.
Oh, wow, you know? Yeah.
I used to regale my parents with, at the age of 4, by doing, you know, drinks at the Ambassador with my brother Bob. You know, I used to do everything I saw was emulated somehow. So it's just, I drank it all in. But I'm with Denzel. I'm from the same era as you. And the 70s for film just knocked my socks off. When I was a teenager and growing up, I'd see the Polanskis and the Coppolas and the Blue Velvet, Don Siegel and Peckinpah, and who else? I mean, my God, it was so fruitful, that era, I think. You weren't in there, were you?
I was earlier, 60s.
Yeah, 60s, yeah? Wow, it's crazy
Well,
time.
Waterfront was the first significant film I
Fantastic.
remember, because it was in black and white and it was in New York.
Yeah. I remember watching that on black and white TV, and it blew my...
That's when you fell in love with film. Is there any...
No, that was, I never thought I could make films. I was out, no relatives, nothing. I was just loved, my mom loved going to the movies, my dad too.
Is there ever
I'm
a
just
moment...
curious, anybody here thought they wanted to be a filmmaker as a child?
Not you.
Yeah, me.
Not at all.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
How old?
Well,
I can't remember wanting anything else. But I think it was a matter of like figuring out what that was. But again, it's like first movies I was really connected to were animated movies, so I drew a lot. I thought I'm going to be Walt Disney. That's my dream. and then it became I'm going to be Spielberg, and then it became et cetera. So that was like it was whoever was.
It's funny because your first film, you can feel that. Your first film is, I mean, it's like this shoebox movie that is just so epic. It's like black and white. You shot it on film, right?
Yeah.
It's
16.
amazing. It's like this musical, but like this Peck and Pod doing a musical kind of thing, like in Boston, and you can tell
Like everyone I loved, I kind of stepped into that.
But it's yours,
Yeah.
But it's yours. It's totally yours.
But isn't the first step, of a great artist is imitating, and then the second one is actually saying, I want to do it differently?
sure.
Well,
Oliver?
it comes from the principle of loving to tell a story, of being transported by a story of some kind. And that was my first springboard. I never dreamt of cinema. I discovered cinema when I crossed the ocean to come to Cambridge, Massachusetts. And it was in Science Center B at Harvard that I saw the Apu trilogy for the first time, for instance. Because in India, we either saw sort of very middle-brow Bollywood, if you went at all. And I was like, really, these folks, I didn't get drunk on movies. There weren't any. I lived in a very tiny little town. So it was first the idea of being transported by a story, whether it was in traveling theater that would come through the village or whether it was reading. And then for me, the passage was through theater, through becoming an actor and really coming, performing on the streets in Calcutta, performing in the stages, Shakespeare a lot, experimental Western theater a lot. But movies came literally after the age of 20 when I discovered that, there were all kinds of movies to be made beyond the Bollywood fare that sometimes I would see, So that was a real eye-opener to see Battle of Algiers was the first film and the only film perhaps that I ever would have wanted to direct. I see that film every few years because it's just as modern today and as topical and as political and as kind of provocative as it was when it was made in 57, I think. The idea of what is a movie and what can it be came to me much later, and that's why my education is spotty, and yet I gobble everything that I loved, and I see the 70s movies were a big thing. I mean, Blue Velvet, Apocalypse Now, it was just an amazing thing for me to see.
Is there ever a moment where any of you fallen out of love with film?
Sure. Several
Really?
times.
Good question.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a long road.
Yeah. When
I'm sure
and why?
You know what I'm talking about.
During the shoot, right?
That's a long shoot.
Give us an example of that, though.
It's personal, it's tough. It's a long haul, and you go through a lot of defeat. There's a lot of setbacks for everybody. And we have some successes here and there, but it always seems like there's more failures than successes.
It's like going to battle or something. You feel like you're a general and you have troops, and sometimes it's a good gang, and sometimes, there's a few of them lacking, and you get left behind, and they leave you hang you out to dry, and sometimes, there are many frustrations, I find.
You're talking about winning and losing. I'm talking about, I'm saying you can't always fix the army. It's always going to be different. But the important thing is the process. And the process gets wearying. I mean, you guys don't know yet, but it can be really wearying. And then you always have to adapt and change. And you change environments. You become another person. Every film makes you reassess where you are on the evolutionary scale, I think.
But was it actually a moment where you said, I'm leaving film, I'm going to do something else?
Well, that might happen now, who knows?
Yeah.
You have to get yourself up to do it every time, especially at our age. My age, not yours. I started with puppet shows. I was just thinking about what she was saying about Shakespeare. I didn't know Shakespeare. I couldn't stand Shakespeare. I couldn't understand it. But
I
you
love
English are
Shakespeare.
different. You're educated. I puppet shows.
Colonial style.
Guignol in France. We put puppet shows on to make money for my families. We'd force them to pay, and they come and see it. And, violent, beat each other over the head like a Mel Gibson movie. And Guignol, they called it. You've heard of it.
Yes.
Puppets are great to learn because you handle the whole
Punchinello.
thing.
Punchinello?
Yeah, it's kind of that, but it's
That's a puppet, though, right? Punchinello?
Yeah, but it's more. It's a puppet, Punch and Judy, sure.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
You beat each other over the head with,
Right.
with a
Denzel,
stick.
what about you? Have you ever thought of stepping away from it?
I did. Just from the business. I had a defeat. And I said, you know what? I'm out. That wasn't healthy.
That's right.
Yeah, it wasn't healthy, to be honest with you. But I didn't plan on being a director. Someone gave me a script and kind of forced me to do it. And I remember talking with Philippe Rousselot, the cinematographer, and I was like, well, where do you put the camera? This was long before we were shooting, not the first day of shooting. But, you know, I'm like, he said, well, you put it in front. I said, huh? He said, I don't know either. We put it in front. I thought there was some magic formula.
Best advice,
He said, you
yeah.
put it in front. I said, you can put it behind? He said, yeah, you can do it. You put it in front, you put it behind, and we shoot. I said, oh, okay. So there was a lot of fear going into when I first directed. Yeah.
More fear than when you go into acting?
Different kind of fear, because 200 other people are sitting around waiting for you to, you know, tell them what to do. Acting is that fear more on stage. You know, your first preview. I did. I've done 3 Broadway shows in the last 10 years, but one of them I forgot which one now. Maybe Fences. The first night we were sold out. I'm not sure if I remember my lines yet. And you don't. You know, they say, oh, if you lose that feeling, then you should quit. I wish I could lose that feeling. You know, for that night. You know, and it was just sheer terror. Or you got to go out there. They're waiting, and you got to go. So, as a director, when I was working on Antoine Fisher, we had a scene down in San Diego at the Naval Yard, and there's like 10 ships and 20, not 20,000, felt like 20,000 people, maybe 3,000, 4,000. And I didn't want to come out of the trailer. I was like, oh, I can't do this. I said, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I got myself in trouble. And the AD actually talked me into coming out. And once I got out, all right. Then I was off to the races. And I had been shooting for 2 or 3 weeks. But then I got to this big, and I was like, what have I done? Literally.
What did he say that got you to come out?
I forgot. I don't know.
Ka-ching.
No, I didn't care about the money. I'd have paid off everybody just to go home and get somebody else. But
And when you say you had that setback, was that as an actor or as a director?
as an actor. As an actor.
Can you tell us what?
Nah.
But I'm like,
No, we're not a setback, but I ain't gonna tell you what it is.
Damien?
oh no, I was just you know, in terms of like setbacks and acting versus directing. I mean, it's I've like you were talking about music earlier. Like performing music was a big part of my life growing up and into my 20s, and eventually I just couldn't handle the. I mean, there were many reasons. I was never going to be good enough. It was one of them. But I also just couldn't handle to me, the particular kind of terror that came from performing on a stage or performing in front of people or performing, period. You know, and so I have this like, I'm in awe of actors, chiefly for that reason, because the sort of exposure level is greater than I ever had on a drum set. At least on a drum set, you got cymbals behind you, and you're slightly hidden. But to me, as nervous as I get directing, I get really nervous, you know, before the first day of set or even on set. I get nervous at screenings, but it's never a touch of the kind of gnawing fear that I ever felt as a drummer, as a musician.
Did your actors on La La Land feel that kind of terror? Singing
Mine
and
still the
dancing?
terror, and no, you know, well, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I mean, they're much better at handling it than I am. I think we were all nervous. We all knew that we were kind of doing something a little, you know, you kind of with a musical. If the musical goes off the rails, it can be ugly. So it's like I think we all kind of knew that, but they're able to not let the nervousness translate into their work, and that's something I was never able to accomplish.
Mel, could walk us through one of your most difficult days on the set of one of your films?
Oh my God.
Because your films often have huge spectacle, hundreds of extras, actors everywhere. Give us an example of a terrifying day.
Yeah, there's like 3,000 people on the set. You got 9 cameras. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of people to feed. There's people complaining. Everybody has to be in the right place at the right time to get the shot. I mean, logistically speaking, you need a pretty good team of people around you to deal with that stuff, and you need a lot of energy. I remember before they had all these monitors so you could look at all the different cameras, I was on a four-wheeler in a kilt with long hair, just like going around and looking at all the cameras and saying, that's a good shot. Can you like do this with the frame or put another lens on or whatever it happened to be? And you just, look, I find it's so overwhelming sometimes. If you think about the big picture, you'd crawl back into a hole and die. So what you have to do, and when you're dropped in the middle of the ocean, and an ocean of a sea of troubles and people and logistical problems and cameras and infighting, and the producers are, you know, there's so much stuff going on behind the scene. You have to ignore it. Say you're in the middle of the ocean and just start swimming that way. Stroke at a time, and you'll hit land eventually. So that's all there is to it. You haven't really got time once you're amongst it to actually be fearful or too worried, because you're just too damn busy. How many decisions do you get asked in an hour, right? When you're in the chair, how many questions, how many decisions do you have to make? And I mean, like that. And you got to do it fast. Especially now. I mean, look, I think we've all been relegated to the area where we're sort of independent films. Am I right here? It's kind of independent filmmaking.
Interesting.
This is a whole new cinematic landscape. You don't have the luxuries that you used to anymore. I just did a film, this Hacksaw Ridge thing. I had 59 days. Right? I had twice that time on Braveheart, and I had more of a budget, and that was 20 years ago. I had 59 days to do like 3 major pitch battle sequences and stuff with the logistical nightmare of explosions and extras and soldiers and stunts and everything else, and it's just, I don't know. You don't know how you're going to do it, you know? It's trying to cram like 10 pounds of, you know, shit in a 5-pound bag, you know? It's impossible.
There's a great beauty in looking into the eye of the storm and just having that one thing to focus on when you're directing a film. I mean, it's all this machinations, everything. You might have all of this at your disposal or to be controlled, but there is a real sort of almost a simplicity to be in that state of shock, of shock, but also of complete focus that is what you're looking for. And you will not stop until you get that and all these elements to come together. To get that moment, hopefully an epiphany, but most likely not. Yeah. You have to create the epiphany later.
It's interesting. I find it under duress, you actually make better decisions. And when you're pushed, I actually get calm. I remember being on an airplane when I was 21, and one of the engines caught on fire.
Oh, wow.
And the hostess freaked out. Wow. Right? She's like, oh my God, we're all gonna die. And it's amazing how quiet you get.
Past years, you had some personal issues. How did that affect your thinking about your work?
Oh, my God. Any experience you have in life enriches your work somehow, good or bad, I think. So, you know, I developed a lot of things when I had some time off. It was the off season, you might say. And it was, I did a lot of stuff. And it's just, you know, so good to be able to sort of come back and do what I love doing, just tell stories. That's all we're all just storytellers, right? I mean, I've told stories to children. I ate stories. We need stories because when we're kicked into this planet, we're like this little stranger on the earth, and we need to hear these things to reaffirm who we are in relation to our planet, our environs, and everyone else, you know? So, yeah, it's just something that you can't switch it off. I mean, you get sick of it, but you can't switch it off.
What about this film made you select it as the project you would do after so many years?
I thought it was so inspiring. I've never actually heard of anyone who was quite this. It was the pinnacle of heroism. I mean, it was like, wow. And he inspired me. And I couldn't be like that, I don't think, not in a million years. But it gives us all hope, I think, that if we can see someone who behaves like an ordinary man in hideous circumstances, doing extraordinary things, I think it speaks to me, speaks to my soul, and hopefully to others, you know. So I think it's a story worth telling. If you're going to spend 18 months on something, it better be worthwhile.
Why is it so important to you, given your refusal to even touch a weapon to serve in a combat unit?
Because when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, I took it personal. Everyone I knew was on fire to join up, including me. I had a job in a defense plant. I could have taken a deferment, but that ain't right.
Coming back to what you said with the Eye of the Storm, what was your toughest moment on Queen of Katwe?
Well, my toughest moment, I think, was creating this big action scene, which required a flood of like 500,000 gallons of water, and we had to move. We excavated this community outside in South Africa, outside Pretoria, because it had the color red earth that Kampala, Uganda, which is where the most of the film was shot, has. So we excavated this place. We built a partially built a church, and then we had to flood it with water. And all our kids from Kampala, the equator runs through Kampala, so it's a very tropical, wonderful weather, had to be taken to South Africa where it was freezing. And we had to stage pretty much 1 week of shooting in the water with little kids in T-shirts and Lupita Nyong'o in her wraps through freezing water day after day after day.
Checkmate! She won! She won!
Fiona's won!
Hey, Joseph, you are not serious. A girl has given you checkmate.
What?
Sorry, I'm just a lucky beginner. I will never ever play you again.
And the one thing that really saved us was somebody had a smart idea of having a hot tub right next to the set. And all these kids who really came from the streets of Katwe, which is the worst slum in Kampala, had never seen a hot tub. So as soon as I said cut, they just were thrilled and jumped into the hot tub. And they remained permanently wet, for, the 6 days. So it was difficult to do, major dramatic scenes. A young 2-year-old almost got flooded out with the water coming in at him, things like that. It's hard to do, very hard to do generally, but harder to do with children who have never faced a winter.
Did they ever rebel?
No, because of the hot tub.
Have any of you dealt with a cast or a crew rebelling against you or questioning?
I have.
Have you? What happened?
I was shooting The Reluctant Fundamentalist, which is a political thriller set in Lahore. And I had a major actor, and there were 2 actors at a table talking. And a large part of the film was like that, so we had really done a lot of rehearsal. But on the day of shooting, and it's always a race against time and money, for all of us, I think, here. And the actor refused to say his lines, the way that they were discussed and written. And so I had to stop in a big tea house that had maybe 200 extras, and I had to go into my video little den and rework it as soon as I possibly could in order for us to just keep going. And I managed to do that, but Oliver was stressed.
Oliver was smiling. How do you handle disputes with actors?
Well, there's been quite a lot of movies and a lot of, how do you say? I mean, you guys are talking about the directing part, but I'm also a writer, co-writer, and I'm also really involved in the editing. So for me, it's a grueling process. I guess to talk about Snowden, it took 2.5 years. It was one of the hardest things I've done because it required so much research. It was research that kills you because you're responsible. You have to be responsible. He's a living person. He's done something very important, and you want to tell it his way, the way he sees it, because that's all I really have to go on. It's new information. So there was a tremendous sense of responsibility carrying something to its conclusion. And then it's not only painful on the set because so many people disagree. They don't want to say a line this way or that way. They make your life hell sometimes. And some actors are hell to go through. And as much as I like them, I don't talk about it afterward. We just get it over with. We make up. But when you get to the editing process, you're repeating this process over and over, where you're being judged by everybody, questioned, everybody by the end of the day. I think when Kubrick said that famous line about, it takes years to make a film and 2 hours to write about it, he was really venting his frustration at people who can sit there and think they see it all in the 2 hours. It's not possible. The editing process is the most questioning on earth. You have to go through the whole script again, and often it leads to rewrites. Rewrites in the editing room.
It is a rewrite, the edit.
You're dead by the time it comes out. And then when you have the review part, the marketing part's the worst because it's so frivolous at one point, and it becomes a group think. It becomes a bunch of crows on a telephone pole. I mean, they think alike. They leave at the same time. They come at the same time. It doesn't matter. He's right. Kubrick is right. There is an eternal thing in this film, and you must address that when you edit and write and direct.
how did you fight with Snowden himself at all? How did you come to meet him?
No, he's a very forthright young man. He's very square, like he looks, and very much straight arrow, a Boy Scout. But the information is so complicated. I'm not a computer man. And just to go through this layers and layers and understand all these programs that the National Security Agency have come up with to snoop on people, data mining at the highest level, all over the world, not just America, the whole world.
But
this
going
includes
back to
cyber warfare,
Snowden,
which is going on now.
How did you come to meet him? Because he's not an easy person to get to.
Business. That was earlier. It was 6 months after he got to Moscow. Yeah, I got an invitation from his lawyer, his human rights lawyer, who had gotten an asylum, to come and meet him because he wanted me to sell his book. He wanted to sell his book about him, which was a fiction. We bought it. It's an interesting book, but we ended up telling the Snowden story.
Where's the modern battlefield, soldier?
Everywhere.
What's the first rule of battle?
Never reveal your position.
And if one unauthorized person knew? If Congress knew?
And so would the enemy.
That, Mr. Snowden, is the state of the world.
He warmed up. I did 9 visits, ultimately, to Moscow. He looked at the film and he gave me advice, very good technical advice, and sometimes other than technical. And he was happy with it. But that's not the reason you make a movie, We knew that we're getting this source here, and that's the only source. The NSA is not going to cooperate with us. They say this is all bullshit, but you live with that.
Barry, what's your biggest challenge on Moonlight? And you're a fairly new director.
Yeah,
Does that make it harder or easier?
It makes it easier, because you sort of don't know what the pitfalls are. You kind of just charge ahead like a wild dog, after a piece of meat. In this film, the playwright Terrell McCraney wrote this thing in Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue, and I sort of fell into it because there's this character who's basically his mom, and my mom and Terrell's mom both went through this horrible addiction to crack cocaine. And Naomi Harris, plays our mom in this film, essentially. And I like to be, I'm a very, it's nuts and bolts, I'm on set, there's a camera, there's the actors, there's a crew, we're working, we're craftspeople. But then when this very, highly skilled actor is portraying your mom in the neighborhood you grew up in, in the apartment, and all these people are watching, and she's really, really good, and I can separate it. I want to go to this place that I think it needs to go to. If I'm going to dig up this shit, then the audience is going to experience it, as potently as possible. We had this issue with her visa, so instead of shooting her over the course of 5 weeks, we shot all her work in 3 days. Wow. So for 3 days, I am just living in this basically, I'm walking therapy. And it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do because I had to separate myself, the director, from myself, the human being, reliving all these things that I've tried my hardest to not relive. But this really beautiful thing happened where, because I was feeling so much, it came out in the craft. And there's a scene we were doing where, it's like Naomi and this, Ashton Sanders was playing the main character, and it's the first time he sees his mom as this other person. And, we shot at OTS, cameras here, cameras there. And I just had this feeling that it hasn't gone far enough. And so after we were done with the scene, I turned to Naomi. I was like, hey, would you mind if we did a take with you looking right into the camera? Because I realized I wanted to put the audience in the body of my main character. And she's like, no, of course, I don't mind. I go, hey, put the 50 on. And then I go, and let's shoot it at 48 frames. I can only think of that because that's how it felt to live it. And it's one of my favorite scenes in the film. It's not shot listed, not planned, but it came from this thing because it was so tough. Just so tough to do these things. It just took the art to a new place, for me at least. So I think out of that struggle that there came some...
Has your mother seen the film?
She has not seen the film. We four-walled the theater for her, and she said she was going to see it, and then a couple of days before decided she wasn't ready. She'll see it on her own schedule. My sister has seen it and relayed to my mom what's in the film. She did say, I did those things. I was out there, and so I'm proud that you made it. But I have to see it on my own schedule. So no, she hasn't seen it yet.
Was there pressure on you to hire better-known actors?
No, not at all. The main character is played by people who no one knows who the hell they are. Yeah. No, there was no pressure. For the character Naomi plays, I felt like we needed someone very skilled. She's the only actor who's in all 3 chapters of the movie. And I knew I wanted to do things that were very sort of heightened in a certain way and yet grounded. And so she's a very well-known actor, but she's also a damn good actor, you know, and that was always more important, so.
What was the big decision that you took, and for all of your films, that you felt least certain about? Just before the Roundtable began, we were talking about the music, and that decision to have classical style music for the first 2/3 of the film is such a bold decision when this is set in a community we associate with different music.
Yeah.
Such a brilliant decision. What was the decision you wrestled with the most?
You know, casting 3 different actors to play the main character. That was the big one, you know? Because I felt like the audience started to fall in love with the character in the first story, and then you've got to readjust to literally a whole different physical being playing the same character in the second story. We might lose some people.
Hey, let your head rest in my hand. Relax. I got you, I promise. I'm not gonna let you go. Hey, man, I got you. There you go. 10 seconds. That right there, you're in the middle of the world.
And then with the guy we cast in the third story, this guy, Trevante Rhodes, he shows up, and you know, one of the themes of the film is this idea of masculinity run amok. And so this actor walked into an audition with just huge muscles. And my gut reaction in the room was, this guy's totally wrong. But then he started reading, and I just saw the sensitivity in his eyes. I go, oh no, he's totally right. If the audience can have the same reaction I just had in the audition process, we'll win, you know? Like, this is gonna work. But then we got on set. In the first 2 days, it's just this guy walking around in his boxers because of the way the schedule was. And I was like, oh no, this is wrong. This is so wrong. What the hell am I doing? And then he did this scene where he has this phone call where this guy from his past calls. And I'm sitting there, and we actually did this thing where Andre Holland actually was on the phone with him. First time he's hearing his voice, and I saw that wave, that pulse of sensitivity and vulnerability again. And I thought, oh, okay. It's right. You know, we did it right. But it was a leap, and it was the only leap I had to explain over and over and over again. But everybody had my back.
When you did Fences, what was the toughest sort of intellectual decision? You're taking a play, and you've kept it largely centered on one place.
To direct it was the toughest decision. Scott Rudin brought me the August Wilson screenplay 7 years ago. And I read it, and I thought it needed work, quite frankly, a lot of work. So I said, well, I haven't read the play. So I read the play, and it said Troy Maxon, 53 years old. As well, I saw James Earl Jones do it in the 80s, so I'm thinking, I always thought I was too young. When I saw 53 and I was 55, I'm like, wait, I better hurry up. It's a true story. So I called Scott Rudin and said, I want to do the play. He said, you want to do the play? I said, yeah. I said, can you raise the money? He said, I'll call you on Monday. Raised the money, we did the play. Great success, multiple award, Tonys, Viola Davis, everyone. So this was actually, of the 3 films I've directed, the easiest way in because we had performed it 114 times to great success. But what I didn't know, I knew Troy. I didn't know everybody else. So that was a process. The play takes place in the backyard. I hate the word opening it up. I just said, well, where else can something take place? Well, it's a house. So we can be in the yard and we can go in the kitchen. We can go in the kitchen, we can go in the dining room, we can go in the front room. We can go out in front of the house, we can go upstairs. So I was very careful over really 2 years, just trying to figure out where I could maybe do a scene and how, now what does that do? Does that tilt the whole thing in the wrong direction?
Decided 17 years ago that boy wasn't going to get involved in those sports. Not after what they did to me in the sports.
Why don't you just admit you were too old for the major leagues? For once, why don't you just admit that?
I'm telling me I was too old. I just wasn't the right color. Hell, I'm 53 years old, can do better than Selkirk's 269 right now.
How are you going to play ball when you were over 40? Sometimes I can't get no sense out of you.
I got good sense, woman. I got sense enough not to let that boy get hurt playing those sports.
If there's 25,000 words in the play and 25,000 words in the screenplay, 24,900 of them are August Wilson's. So I added a, thing here or there or something like that. But it was a process, an organic process, as opposed to just we're going to open it up. What does that mean? We can do the scenes on the roof, or we're going to fly to Texas, or, what does that mean? And we were fortunate to be able to shoot it on the hill in Pittsburgh. So what I got from the people, old man, he used to want to always cook food for us. Mr. Greenlee in the backyard couldn't hear. You want some coffee? Not today, Mr. Greenlee. Huh? And he'd always come, I'm going back inside. You getting ready to shoot, huh? Huh? He could never hear. So all of those people, all of that feeling, how they take care of each other up there on the hill. Yeah, I guess we could have shot it in Boston or New York, but it was a Pittsburgh Hill story, and that all fed us.
Damien, there's a number of shots in La La Land that are very specialized and require particular light and particular choreography. Tell us a little bit about your most challenging day or most challenging sequence you pulled off.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something living in LA. I wasn't born here, but I've lived here for about 9 years now. The skies here have always just kind of really, like when I first moved to LA, I hadn't seen skies this big. And at certain times of day, this colorful, and just this certain way, especially like in the valley, when we call it magic hour or whatever, but it's whenever the sun starts to begin its dip, there's something really truly Technicolor, I think, about the sky. And so if I was going to do a Technicolor musical, I wanted to use that sky and try to really milk it. And try to use it for what the 50s musicals I loved would use painted backdrops for. But that, of course, imposes its own kind of challenge. So we wound up doing, sort of a couple key sequences, but the most challenging one was this duet dance between Ryan and Emma. My DP, Lena Sangren, and I, we wanted it to be a certain time of day, so the sky would look a certain way. We didn't have the money to kind of digitally make the sky look that way. So that gives you a half-hour window, and it's a 6-minute unbroken, dialogue into singing, into dancing, back to dialogue shot on a crane. So, it was this kind of thing where you want to try to have it as planned down to a T as you can, because you only have and rehearse it till it's like the back of your hand, and then you have half an hour basically to shoot it. And we would just cram in as many takes as we could into that half-hour window. And we came back the next day, so we had 2 nights to do it. We wound up using the second take of the second night. So I'm glad we got the second night, because the first night didn't give us the take we needed. But the challenge, I think, even more than that, is to try to make it not seem like you did all that while you're shooting it, right? Is to try to actually make it seem like, they just happen to be walking, and now they're dancing, and look at that sky, that's nice, and it's just so it's just kind of unfolding, and like no one did anything.
She captured a feeling, sky with no ceiling, the sunset inside a frame. Here's to the ones who dream.
That's where you really sort of wind up worrying yourself and trying to kind of make sure you've got that tonal balance, right? It's where really the actors have to carry a lot of the burden and make the hard work look effortless, ideally.
Is there a part of the directing process that you love the best, and is there a part that you really don't like?
Well, I love the shooting. If you can, because the challenge is the eye of the storm, how to capture life. And I'm a lot like Denzel's story of shooting on the hill. I also shoot in real locations. Authenticity is a huge part of what gives me that life. And shooting in Katwe, the worst slum, it was the same. The community came out, the pigs came out, the goats came out, the mud came out. The brick kilns were smoking, and you really are. And I was working with a lot of the actors, the young kids in the film, are from that area. I've never faced a camera before. And I always loved, like I did with Denzel in Mississippi Masala 25 years ago, I always love putting incredibly skilled actors, great legendary actors sometimes, opposite people who have never thought to act before. In this case, in Queen of Katwe, it was children, but in Mississippi Masala, it was a young woman called Sarita.
Did you like that
Chaudhry.
process?
Yeah.
Of being with actors who'd never acted before?
I didn't know. I didn't know she had not acted.
Oh, I know. That was you were
didn't tell me.
completely comfortable with her.
No, I've
And,
worked with some actors that need to stop. The real experienced actors that really should quit.
But that's the beauty of picking the right kid in this case, the children. So it's that alchemy I also love. But
and what do you not like?
What I really don't like is always fighting against time. And again, with working with kids and Disney financing this film, it was an 8-hour labor law, very strict, no matter if you were in Uganda or in Los Angeles. So there was one Disney executive, and he was this guy, he always reminded me of the Seventh Seal. So when he would come on set, I knew that my children were going to be taken away. Because I was literally in the shot, and I have had 2 occasions in which they just literally lifted my kid and took them back. Even though these are kids from this, right there, and we all rough and tumble and we work really long hours, it doesn't matter, but 8 hours meant 8 hours. So that was tough, to in the middle of a shot, literally, there's no going back, it's not like an actor you can beg and say,
do you like the shooting process, or do you prefer the writing, the editing?
It's titillating. Just made me laugh. I was thinking we were shooting this very tough scene at the last day of World Trade Center, and I had cast a child actor, and it rode all on her shoulders. She had to do one thing only, run to her daddy and get swept up in his arms. And she was a little prima donna, and all of a sudden she decided she didn't want to do it, and we had 500-600 extras at a picnic overlooking the New York skyline. End of day, last shot. Oh, Jesus Christ. Meanwhile, there was a little girl there that I loved her look, and she was smiling, and she was sort of a stand-in, I think. And I just said, fire her. Hire her.
Wow.
That little girl ran right into those arms, and it was so beautiful, such a shot, and ended the movie, too. That little girl, I owed.
What do you not like?
Breaks you get. It's fun.
What do you not like in the process?
Oh, gosh, there's so much not to like. As you say, you fight with everyone at some point or another. Your DP, your production designer sometimes lets you down, doesn't agree with you. Sometimes an actor or actress says, no, I don't want to say that line. Well, you said it in rehearsal. Why can't you? We did it in rehearsal. I thought we understood each other. I like rehearsal. I like to agree, so I had to avoid these things on the set. Well, she didn't want to say it because it was personal to her. It hurt her. Am I getting old? Something like that. It was the line to her son. And I said, fine, then don't do it. And we shot a couple of takes. It was silent. And let her hear herself. Let her hear it, feel it. She felt the deadness in it. Sure enough, she came back and she did it. There's all those challenges where how do you play mental games with people? How do you get them to do something you think is right? And you could be wrong, too.
What did you like and not like about the process of working on Hacksaw?
Oh, my God. I loved everything about it. I mean, the actors that I got, for example, I've worked on films where you had actors who never acted before, ever. A whole cast of them on this film I did called Apocalypto.
Right. Yeah, I love that.
And it was that was a very interesting. It's time consuming, but it was very rewarding. And I found out that I'm actually not a bad acting teacher because I would instruct them and said it's all about breathing. And they believed me. They looked at me like I knew what I was talking about. I said, just breathe and just emulate the pattern of the emotional state you think that this person is in at this point. Then breathe and just think it, and it'll just magically happen. And by God, it sort of did. It was like, maybe I'm onto something, I don't know. But, oh my God, what was the question again, though?
What you like the most and what you feel uncomfortable with? I mean, it's interesting because Hitchcock hated shooting, famously. Directors tend to have certain strengths and certain weaknesses. Yes. What area do you like the most and feel the most comfortable in, and the opposite?
Yeah, I like telling stories where no one says anything. And it's just wonderful to me to be able to sort of speak volumes without dialogue. Dialogue is necessary and important, and there are certainly films where it's, dependent on that for sure, and it's dialogue heavy, and that's the style of what you're doing. But I had this actor called Andrew Garfield in the film. This kid is amazing, and he speaks volumes without words, and you can see his soul through his eyeballs,
What about dogs, Mel?
Dogs, I hate dogs. I love dogs. I like pat them on the head. But
I'm talking about shooting dogs.
Shooting dogs? What do you mean?
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. Filming with dogs?
That kills you.
Yeah.
It can kill you.
Of course.
Why have you mentioned that?
Budget in one day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did some hunting scenes. I think
Dogs
I had
and children, they
retrievers.
say.
It took so long to get these shots, and we lost so much time with the actors that they weren't able to do what they needed to do.
Try a Jaguar. Try a Jaguar.
Now that you've gone through that,
The Jaguar, yeah, how'd that work out?
The Jaguar was like,
Fine.
they're completely wild. They can't be trained.
Oh, they can't.
No.
I had a great experience with elephants.
Yeah.
But Jaguars, no.
No, people thought that thing wasn't in the shot. They thought we put the Jaguar in later, but it was actually chasing the guy.
I see.
God.
It was. It was on a leash, on a line, and you could put brakes on him if you needed to.
Dogs and cats are very dangerous.
Barry, what part of it have you come to feel you like the best and that you don't care for?
I love production. I mean, love production. Like, I could 365 days a year, if I could.
Shooting.
Yeah, I just love production. I'm my best self on a film set. I move, and you're gonna ask the crews that work with me. I just love being on set. Post is different. It's just too slow. It's just too slow, and everything's very finite. I love how beautiful it is. You walk on a set, and you just have no idea. It's why I don't storyboard. It's all possible. You get in post, and it's very finite. It's a different kind of puzzle you got to piece together. Man, we had this scene in Moonlight where it's just the swimming scene. We don't have any cover sets. I think I have 6 hours. There's a storm coming in. I've got 90 minutes. It's like, oh, this is heaven. Because in 90 minutes, it'll be over. But now, for 90 minutes, it's just full go. Everybody's full go. And something comes out of that
But
you
a film
can't get
can be
otherwise.
changed massively in the editing.
True.
Or in post-production. I sat with you when you were going through post-production on Savages, and I really felt it was like watching Jackson Pollock throwing in some more color and sound, and it became, this incredibly
We went with two
impressionistic
endings
thing.
on that movie. We embraced both endings, which is a very rare thing to do in movies.
You said you developed a lot of things in that sort of imposed hiatus. Is there one that you would love to do, and for all of you, a passion project you've been unable to make?
I'm working on a story and it's from history books, and it's about the 15th century, and it's about the Medicis. But it's about Lorenzo the Magnificent. In fact, I called it The Magnificent, but I might have to change the title since Denzel stole it on his last picture.
You're right.
But it was called The Magnificent, and it's about this guy who's he's an amazing character in history, and it's just a wonderful story. And you dig into the history, and we wrote the screen. It's taken 15 years to jiggle it, and it's pretty cool. I'm just excited about it. I don't know how to... It's just a really compelling story of love and revenge, and and there's a murder plot, a successful... The true history is amazing because these brothers had a hit put on them when they were young, and by a rival family, and they were all bankers in Florence. And one of the people involved in the successful murder plot was the Pope. I mean, so Sixtus IV, and one of these brothers got dead, and they dug up their skulls. Mussolini dug up their skulls to see the Medici brothers, and one of them is young. He's got teeth all sharp. The other one, his teeth are all worn down, but the sharp-toothed one has all kinds of chips all over his head from where the daggers hit. Wow. It's crazy. Wow. And Florence at that time, wow. In the 15th century, what a world. And everything was changing. The thought was changing. And, the art. Michelangelo, Lorenzo found Michelangelo. He said, who painted the cherub in the corner there? He says, that's my little friend. He's 16 years old. He said, invite him to dinner. So he had an eye for what was really quality and good. It's a...
Oh, wow, I'd love to see that.
There's a cool story in there. Very cool.
What about you, Denzel?
What was the question?
Do you have a passion project like that you'd love to direct?
No. No. Because I was an actor first, and because I understand how difficult it is to make a film, Dan Gilroy's written a great script called Inner City. And I look forward to not having to worry about anything other than just what I'm doing. So it's too hard to I don't know if I'm wired yet to think that way. That, oh, this is my passion project. I don't even have passion projects as an actor. There's nothing I want to do. I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And so no, I don't have a passion project. But I know it'll be a while before I do it again.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
One thing Barry mentioned was talking about his personal experience and the filmmaker versus the story you're telling. And it got me thinking, Oliver, a lot of times your films are not only judged on their own merits, but you as a filmmaker as well. And I'm curious whether you think that's a fair assessment and something that Mel has dealt with as well, like judging the filmmaker as separate and apart from the film or intertwined.
I have to say I don't want to protest too much, but I've had that problem since I started. I think because one of my first films was about Vietnam, they thought I was a soldier, and then because I had some rough language about women in Salvador, I didn't like women. So they identify you, they typecast you, and it stays that way. It's surprising. There are some critics that are still knocking me 30 years later, the same stuff. They didn't like one film I did, and they say, well, he was much better before when he did that. But they never said a kind word then, so what are they talking about? So it's really, I'm not Richard Nixon and Jim Morrison. They're two different people. But they kind of assume that I'm crazy or I'm Richard Nixon in some way. So it keeps going. You get typecast the whole time. I can guarantee that. What do you think?
Yeah. There's
You have a
perceptions.
Jesus complex,
There's
right?
perceptions that you can't shift.
Do you think
no
it's
matter
unfair?
what. Do I think it's unfair? I don't know if it's unfair. It's just, well, it's not just. Put it that way. It's not right. Quite.
In a weird way, it almost makes like you find it almost more often maybe in the case of good movies. You know, you think of like if you're being thought of as Nixon or Jim Morrison, to me that's actually part of why those movies are great.
I agree with you. That's because you get subjectively involved.
Yeah, you feel
you are that person while you're making the movie, but then you shift your persona. You go like an actor does. You go into something else.
Yeah.
I think but something like, what do you think when people say, I won't see that, it's a Mel Gibson movie?
I was on live television one time, and Anderson Cooper sort of got it. People actually booed when the credits on your film came up at the beginning of the movie. And I'm saying, like at the beginning of the film, when my name came up, yeah, they booed. And I said, the credits aren't on the beginning of the film. So he's full of shit.
So that doesn't bother you?
It doesn't bother me a bit. People may say that.
But it's painful. I mean,
people go and see it.
Well, it came up this year because, this filmmaker, Nate Parker, there's a lot of people that didn't see his film because of the controversy surrounding him. So do you think that's fair?
I don't think it's fair. He was cleared of all that stuff. And I think it was years ago they sort of went into that on a level that was all judicial and everything else. And I think, they probably came to a conclusion. You have to follow the system there. I think he's innocent of all that stuff. So, the fact that he has to live with that stigma and that it affects the art he does is, I think, unfair.
So, Mira, do you think that it's fair that the art should be separated from the particular filmmaker?
I think, yes, the art should be separated. But in this case, it was ironic that also at the heart of The Birth of a Nation was the nature of what he was indicted for or linked with. And I think the approach of how one discusses that intervention or that mix should have been clearer and more something that was forthcoming, And that was, I think, what created ambiguity and confusion in the eyes of the audience.
I want to ask you one question. I think we have to wrap up, but just going back and looking at your lives before you became filmmakers, what was your first job or what was your worst job that you had before you entered the film business?
I was a garbage man, like Troy. Garbage man, you get 8 hours worth of work, but you can do it in 3. So you can go home as soon as you finish. Post office, you get 3 hours worth of work and you make it last 8. I did both. I like being a garbage man better. But they weren't bad jobs. It's like, people say, the difficulty of making a movie. I'm like, send your son to Iraq. That's difficult. It's just a movie. It's like, relax. I don't play that precious nonsense. We're moving over. Get out of here. Your son got shot in the face. That's difficult. Making a movie is a luxury. It's a gift. It's an opportunity, and most importantly, it's a gift. Obviously, everybody here is talented enough to do that, but don't get it twisted. It's just a movie. It ain't that big a deal.
Mira, what about you?
Well, I was a projectionist at college and in audiovisual, and I'm really not technologically inclined. So I remember showing films and not sometimes getting so involved with the film. I mean, this was Satyajit Ray's The Music Group that I forgot to put the slack up, take it up. And suddenly the emulsion is just like piling up around me, around up to the knees, and the audience is there, so I'm just keeping on changing reels. But for me, I'm like getting embedded in film. This used to happen a little far too often for my adrenaline.
Oliver, what about you? Well, you were...
I was a lot of things. I was, as you know, I was a soldier. I was a merchant sailor. Before that, I was a teacher over there in Asia. I was, then in New York, I was a temp, every day, do a different job. That was hard. Messenger, production assistant, several things, including a porno film. And,
including what in a porno film?
And an unemployed. And a taxi driver. I was a taxi driver at a night shift for a long time. Yeah.
What did you do on the porno film?
A fluff piece.
Right. What did you do on the porno film?
I was a production assistant. I had to haul up crab dollies 3-4 flights of stairs. But it was a soft porno. It was, it wasn't particularly exciting.
What about you, Barry?
My first job was cutting grass. It's Miami, this grass, it grows everywhere. Just get the lawnmower out, walk down the neighborhood and cut grass. But I think my worst job, it wasn't a bad job. When I first moved to LA, I was a director's assistant, and then I was a development assistant. And I really tried to be good at it. And this thing happened where I had this rude awakening where I realized that I was bullshitting myself because I thought, I want to be a filmmaker, and this is my way. But I wasn't really trying to be a filmmaker, I was trying to be a development assistant, And realizing that about myself, that I wasn't really risking it, it was like I felt terrible. It's like, okay, all right, get the hell out of here. Go make a movie, if that's really what you want to do. Because being an assistant wasn't working towards actually doing that thing, so.
Your first movie was like it's funny because was this before Medicine for Melancholy?
Right before.
It was what kind of?
Yeah.
Because when I made my first film, I think maybe because they're both black and white movies, it's probably the only connection. I got a call as soon as someone had seen my movie and said, "Oh, you have to check out it's Medicine for Melancholy," because I think it was roughly the same.
The other way.
It was the same deal.
Yeah, the other way.
What was your first or worst job? Did you're young, so you haven't had a worse job yet.
I don't know if it's the worst. I had a bunch of those kind of odd jobs starting out. Certainly jobs I was terrible at. Making sandwiches at a deli counter, carving meat, stuff like that. I wasn't very good. Moving company, wasn't very good at that. I got paid a little bit as a musician, early on. That's, in a way, again, I guess that's probably the thing that fed into the filmmaking the most, and, in terms of actually kind of that sort of emotional experience. And then, I guess my version of Barry's story in terms of moving out here was, first step through the door was getting work as a writer for hire. But really, if it was really, really, really schlocky, that was my, it was like, rewrites on sequels of, horror movies and just anything that I could get my hands on just to pay the bills. I loved the idea of being able to, that I'd actually pay a bill by writing was just miraculous. So I would write literally anything you could send me, and I would do a rewrite on it. And that's kind of what I did. My off hours, I'd try to write La La Land or Whiplash or something that I would kind of want to do myself. But otherwise, I was full in as kind of writing workforce.
What about you, Mel?
Oh, this sounds like you hear that Pete and Dud routine. Right. They said, "What's the worst job you ever had?" And he says, "The worst job I ever had was getting rid of Winston Churchill's bogies." You ever hear that one?
No,
it's very funny.
I'm going to find it, though.
Yeah, you'll find it. Well, I've done a bunch of really boring things, like in factories and stuff. Like the worst one, I think, was making aluminum prefab windows, just putting together hammers and bits of rubber and stuff. And then I worked on an orange juice factory. It was like Jerry Lewis, 10,000-gallon vats, and you take the wrong hose off the wrong, and you flood the factory full. It was crazy stuff. And just the whole monotony and the boredom, my mind would soar to incredible places. And I realized that I was very fortunate to do what I do, so that I didn't have to do that. And I seized onto an education because of those jobs.
May I ask Damien a question?
Yeah,
I'm just curious. You're saying that Whiplash really was your first script?
It was probably the 100th script I'd written at that point, but just in terms of all the bad scripts I put in a drawer or scripts I wrote for hire. But it was my first Yeah, I guess because Guy Malley didn't really have a script, my first one. So it was my first like script that I made.
It's really
myself.
amazing. And for hire, did anything get produced?
Yeah.
Don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, this group has lots of secrets.
All right, we'll end on a speed round.
Speed round.
Speed round. What did you get in trouble for most as a kid? Denzel.
Can't talk about it.
Oh.
Whoa.
That sounds intriguing.
Who else?
All right.
Being in an open-air truck with 16 young men and being spotted by an uncle as we went under a main bridge in Delhi. I was off to rehearsal. I was the only female actor in a play, but to be seen with 16 young men in broad daylight in Delhi was not a good thing for a good Indian girl.
I think you got the question backwards. For me, the trouble starts later. I was a pretty good kid.
Okay.
That's a pretty good kid, too.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I mean, I remember once getting in trouble for, like, we were really poor. We would get the welfare cheese. And I remember I was begging for this fucking welfare cheese. I was, give me cheese, give me cheese, give me cheese. We put it in the microwave, put it on 2 slices of white bread. And I remember, to teach me a lesson, my grandma sat me down one day with the whole block of cheese, block like this big, and she made me eat it. She made me eat it. And I didn't get through all of it, obviously, but the lesson was, you know, we eat this because we have to, not because we want to. Stop asking for this damn cheese. So.
I want to modify. I want to put a footnote on that. My issue when I was young was fear. Scared. Don't want to do anything wrong. And I think a lot of kids live with that, too.
Fear of not doing something wrong.
Fear of anything. Everything. Teachers, authority. Doing something wrong, that internal conscience, all that stuff.
How'd you get over that?
I haven't.
Damien?
I just have one memory. I got in trouble a lot as a kid. I was a handful. But my one memory is which I thought I wouldn't get in trouble for at all, was my mom was getting into her car, pulling out the driveway. I thought, oh, it's gonna be awesome to ride atop the car. So I just kind of jumped on and like held on the top of the car. I'd seen it in movies. I thought, this is what they do. And my mom realizes before we like actually get out the road, and that's the most trouble I've ever been.
So riding the roof of the car.
That one lasted a while. I tried to. I didn't even say, it's not an exciting story, because, you know, if she hadn't noticed, I would have just ridden wherever she was going, down the New Jersey Turnpike.
Right.
But yeah, it didn't get that far.
Last but not least.
Oh, God. I cut up a lot as a kid, and I had these 4 brothers who were all around the same age. So, I walked on the top of barns where the roof was falling in, and, I get a hiding for that kind of stuff. But, mostly what I get in trouble for was I was always the damn fool that used to tell the truth and own up to stuff. So it was like, yeah, I did it, and then I'd be the one getting the hide, at school or anywhere else. So, I don't know, occupational hazard.
Good,
Right.
well, perfect.
On that note.
I would like to thank all of you for taking part in the Hollywood Reporter Roundtable's directors. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
What's going on? I'm Alicia Keys. I'm Taraji P. Henson.
John Favreau.
Jeff Bridges here.
Matt Damon.
Naomi Harris.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks for watching.
For more videos, be sure to subscribe.
I guess subscribe online for more videos if you want more of that stuff.
I don't work for The Hollywood Reporter. They paid me to say that, though.